Okay, this is called, or it's about Chinese opinion on John Mearsheimer. It was on YouTube. That was the title. A young Chinese man on YouTube. His name I cannot find because it's not in the after or comments or whatever. But he mentions his father calls him Michael. So Michael. The YouTube show is called Awakening. It's very, very interesting, not least because his takes reflect a hugely different culture to ours. And so, of course, we fear it. Ours, after long days and hours, probably starting with COVID while I was in Florence shooting a documentary about Dante, our cultural view clearly is that of Piers Morgan. It is what we see. He is the Gestalt. He is us. Piers is interesting because he is us. White, male, defensive of his rather bovine worldview, perhaps brighter than that view because he exposes himself to the Mearsheimer types. He got caught yesterday, for instance, confusing typically a country's right to defend itself, a mantra du jour, shared by the shallow, with vengeance or retribution, which is in fact Western military orthodoxy, from the aftermath of Little Big Horn to 9/11 and Gaza, probably a reality created by one side in the tussle, the dispute, having massive military superiority, which is the fundamental reason for Western civilization's apparent ascendancy, the single reason. They built the biggest and best killing machines ever. Why they felt this was the thing to do, you can argue among yourselves, but it needs unpicking soon because it has reached its nadir in Gaza. Never again, indeed. The young Chinese Michael reveals a lot very quickly. For instance, the majority of his educated Chinese friends blame NATO for the war in Ukraine, roughly 80%. All his European colleagues in business and his contacts through universities, a very broad range, a lot of people, liberal to conservative, 100% blame Russia. And it's one man. Very few of the Chinese crew believes it is Putin's war, like 5%. There's an obvious, easy response. They are brainwashed. Chinese, of course. Piers and the BBC would all agree. Yesterday, the BBC was having a big, expensive symposium on the media worldwide, subtitled Iran, Russia, and China. The amazing baseline yesterday was a series of young people, ruddy-cheeked and scraggly-bearded, lauding the BBC and the NYT as the indisputable arbiters of truth in our world today. I sneezed in my Coca-Cola. No dissent. Western supremacism in a flash, destroying its own symposium, et voila. I suppose they expected my assent. I had to turn its fascism off. Piers at least stumbles when John tells him the Battle of Britain was defensive, Dresden was a war crime, a distinction that had obviously never occurred to him or to anybody else. Again, because the Western world has assured itself of overwhelming military superiority since Columbus put cannons on the Santa Maria. It makes us idiots. Well, surely you must agree that if Putin nukes Kyiv, the US will retaliate. No, says John. It's not in their interest. Ukraine has no oil. Piers flushes. His morals have been offended. War is not war for him. It is a balance of atrocities. We might tell ourselves Hiroshima and Nagasaki saved lives, parentheses, American lives, the ones that count, end parentheses, but it's still a war crime to which Japan could not respond in kind. Once more, the superiority of bombs. And by the way, while I'm here, when the ICJ was telling us the constituent ingredients of genocide, I seem to recall one was the capacity to commit it, or the power to successfully annihilate. Hamas does not possess this firepower. We all know it. Their hateful intent is impotent. If you overwhelm the rest militarily, you have a responsibility. The US is famously irresponsible. She and her colonial allies, from Cortez to the Gatling guns of Kenya, have only really engaged in wars with each other. And then they called them world wars, like the World Series that doesn't even include Mexico. These other wars from Iraq to Grenada are onslaughts. They're not wars. They're not competitions between combatants of any kind of equality. And even now we are doing them proxy style. We're not even no skin in the game with drones. Is drone warfare war? Not from the droner's side. It is to the ones they bomb, but the bombers sit in bunkers in Oklahoma or Tehran. For some reason, when I was 12, I was selected at school to write a speech to present to the local Kiwanis Club in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh. 3 or 4 others, I was not special. So, 1968. I remember the first line, "We are not born hating, we are taught to." I knew at the time my speech was silly and naive and 12 years old, but I remembered it today. Someone said, "Haters gonna hate," the lazy slogan, and I thought, no, the hated gonna hate. And immediately I wept a little bit. Just bang. What a huge burden. What does one do with it? 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, imagine, and now suddenly they are caught up hugely in the fall of Western civilization. My civilization that invented a religion to forgive and give license to its need to control the whole of all life everywhere. The hated now hating on Will and Kate as they traipse patronizingly around the Caribbean. I was a tot when the Queen visited Trinidad. Everybody queued up and waved, beautiful jet black Africans and East Indians cheering for the great white mother. Things have changed. They might have changed otherwise, but we don't do that. We carry blithely on, historians burning midnight oil or attending BBC symposia to reiterate the marvelousness, our marvelousness, while the evidence stares them in the face, evidence to the contrary. So the hated now are hating, perhaps no end in sight. We will wait on leaders not yet here. When they show, I hope the hate won't kill them like so many times before. After the war, looking more and more likely, maybe some other culture will rise to replace the hate-driven one. African would be my vote, or Chinese. Ooh, no, they cannot do worse, chica.